99.6%, gender-affirming care can be life-saving. If this bill passes, I am literally afraid for my child's life. My child is vibrant, alive, and full of love. Please don't take that away from her. How will it hurt you to allow my child to be herself? Please, please vote no on this bill.
Hi.
Make sure your microphone is, make sure the green light's on.
Hi. My name is
Welcome.
Fisher Wells. I am 13 years old, and I'm going to Atherton High School next school year, so that should be fun. I just wanted to come here and say that I am in strong opposition to this bill. I got a puberty blocker implant a couple months ago, which was a very fun experience. And I know a couple friends who have also gotten puberty blocker implants. But here's the thing. I also know a ton of people who are trans at school, but at home, their parents would kick them out and beat them bloody if they came out. I fear for them. I don't fear for myself, but I fear for my friends. Thank you so much, and please vote no.
Thank you for your
I'm
testimony.
going to skip to the end here.
Please,
I'm Jennifer.
Please introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm Jennifer Alonzo. I'm Fisher's mom. I want to tell you about a member of my family you haven't met. His arm muscles were like this. He wore cowboy boots. He voted for Trump twice, and he probably would have voted for all y'all. And he was an evangelical. And when we told him about Fisher, he came to us with love, and he sat Fisher and I down, and he said, I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. And he said, I've always thought I was a woman. He told me that he fought against it his whole life because his father beat him, and he knew he would kill him if he knew who he really was. He said his mother would have abandoned him. He was assaulted many times as a teenager because he hadn't quite learned how to hide it. He struggled his whole life to maintain his relationships, even with his children. He could do a relationship with one person, and it was always his wife. He told Fisher and I that he was so glad things are different now. He said, y'all do what's right. You fight for what's right. And I told him I thought things were different here in Kentucky, that maybe he could come out. Maybe he could come to Kentucky and find a home with us and our wonderful community here. Maybe he could let himself be who he was just a little bit now. And he said no. It was too late, and all the pain would be over soon. And I'm so sorry to tell you he was right, because that was the last day I saw him before I had to say goodbye. So I'm going to ask you, because maybe someone you've loved your whole life is trans and hiding it and suffering right now, and they're suffering more because of what y'all are doing to them. So do you want the Kentucky to be the Kentucky I see everywhere, but when I'm in this building? Or do you want the Kentucky that y'all are trying to create? Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The time has expired for the opposition, and I will now recognize Vice Chair Decker to present House Bill 470, if she'll make her way to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized. You can proceed.
I am Representative Jennifer Decker, and I serve as the state representative from the state's 58th House District. Mr. Chairman, we have a committee substitute.
There is a committee sub. Is there a motion to adopt the committee substitute? A motion by Representative Petrie. Is there a second? Second by Representative Flannery. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And the ayes have it, and the committee substitute is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here today to present House Committee Substitute to House Bill 470, legislation that seeks to protect Kentucky's children from irreparable damage. This substitute, as amended, prohibits access to gender transitioning services to those under the age of 18, specifically hormone and surgical treatments. I will go through a brief description, section by section, of the committee sub. Section 1 creates a new section of KRS Chapter 311 to define terms. Section 2 creates a new section of KRS Chapter 311 to state that the provision of gender transition services to a person under the age of 18 by a health care provider is unethical and unprofessional conduct, and that the provider is unfit to perform the duties and discharge the responsibilities of his or her profession, position, or occupation. The committee sub provides due process for directing that the disciplinary and hearing process of each licensing and certification board for medical professionals be used to investigate any report of provision of gender transition services having taken place in our state for persons under the age of 18. The sub requires revocation of a provider's license and termination of public funding for any public employee if the provision of such services is confirmed. Section 3 of the sub creates new section of KRS 311 to require that providers be jointly and severally liable for all damages and costs sustained for providing gender transition services or aiding and assisting a person under the age of 18 years to consider or to obtain gender transition services. The sub provides a complete defense to any provider who has any type of complaint filed against him or her because of the provider's choice to refuse to provide gender transition services to a person under the age of 18 years. Provision in Section 3 of the bill provides that anyone who's been harmed or a parent or guardian of a person before the person attains the age of 18, there is a cause of action provided. The sub requires such an action be brought by the person harmed within 30 years of the person attaining the age of 18, with exceptions under which the time may be longer, or by the parent of the guardian of a person harmed before the person turns the age of 18. The sub also allows a cause of action to be brought by a parent or guardian of the person if the person or the provider dies before the child reaches the age of 18, within the statute of limitations. Section 4 creates a new section of KRS Chapter 311 to prohibit the use of public funds for gender transition services, prohibits a provider employed by the state, local, or county government to include gender transition services. Section 5 permits the Attorney General to bring action to enforce the provisions, and it prohibits intervention as a matter of right in these provisions if they are challenged. It prohibits publicly employed healthcare providers from intervening in any legal action challenging the provisions of this act. Section 6 creates a new section of KRS Section 205 to prohibit Medicaid coverage of gender transition services for a person under the age of 18 years. Section 7 creates a new section of Subtitle 12 of KRS Chapter 304 to establish liability for private insurers that elect to cover gender transition procedures for a person under the age of 18 years. Section 8 amends KRS 18A.225 to prohibit a fully insured benefit plan or self-insured plan for public employees from covering gender transition services for a person under the age of 18 years. Section 9 amends KRS 454.210, Kentucky's long-arm statute, to permit a court to exercise personal jurisdiction over a person who acts directly or by an agent as to a claim arising from a person's engaging in the provision of gender transition services to a Kentucky resident under the age of 18 years. It amends, Chapter 10 amends KRS 141.039 to require that corporate income relating to a provision of gender transition services to a person under the age of 18 be added to net income. Section 11 amends KRS 213.121 to prohibit name changes on vital statistic records if the purpose of that name change is to assist a person under the age of 18 with a gender transition. Section 12 amends KRS 401.020 to prohibit a name change by a court if the purpose of the name change is to assist a person under the age of 18 with a gender transition. Section 13 of the bill of the sub
Pardon?
requires
Send me a text.
If you would suspend till we get this muted.
Dr. Hyde, I
Mr.
think
Hyatt, you need to mute yourself.
Yes, hello.
Mute your microphone.
Okay,
You've
sorry.
disrupted the entire meeting. Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Decker.
Section 13 requires detained individuals to be classified only as belonging to the biological sex and being male or female as defined by this act. Section 14 is a severability clause, and Section 15 allows the act to be cited as the Do No Harm Act. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to present this substitute. I believe there is a great deal of compassion in this body for the children under the age of 18 who seek these services and their parents, and on the side of of supporting this bill. There is compassion on both sides. However, there is no quality long-term study to establish that there is no long-term benefit to gender transition services, and more importantly, there is long-term evidence that these services result in permanent, lifelong harm to children. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Decker. And I know that you have several witnesses that you have presented to the committee, and I will let you go through each one of those as time permits. And I think Dr. Hyatt has made an appearance already, so we'll recognize you, Dr. Hyatt, if you'll introduce yourself. Now you unmute yourself. There you go.
I
Thank
apologize.
you. No, that's okay.
For that. My name is Dr. Roger Hyatt, Jr. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Been in practice for over 30 years. I've worked with thousands of young people, including several hundred who deal with the issue of gender dysphoria.
And you can begin your testimony.
Oh.
Or you may just be standing around for questions, which is he.
No, I have something to say.
What is your preference? Well, please
I wasn't
proceed.
sure if
Please
format was
proceed.
gonna-
Please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let me, I have some prepared remarks. I just got through with a big meeting, so my apologies. As I mentioned, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I've worked with thousands of troubled youth, including hundreds struggling with the issue of gender dysphoria. In reality, the question of gender is answered at conception. Opinions to the contrary are simply misinformation. Opponents of this bill must convince you that it is not the performance of, but rather the prevention of, chemical castration and genital mutilation of gender-confused minors that is the act of child abuse, and that such legislation will result in skyrocketing levels of suicidal thought and behavior in otherwise healthy kids. This is simply not the case. On the contrary, suicidality is a close companion of transgender identity throughout the life cycle. Despite all medical and surgical efforts, the suicide rate among transgender individuals is documented to be about 19 times higher than for those who embrace their chromosomal sex. The only outcome that actually results in decreased suicidality is desistance, or a return to gender identity consistent with biological reality. The pivotal event leading to children abandoning a transgender identity is the onset of puberty. Puberty blockers, therefore, adversely impact the probability of the very outcome with the most favorable prognosis. While 80 to 90% of affected kids will desist without these interventions, almost all who initiate puberty blockers will continue to identify as the opposite sex into adulthood. Efforts to medicalize this psychiatric disorder rob otherwise healthy youth of the opportunity to rediscover their innate biology and instead doom them to a lifetime as medical patients in pursuit of an impossible dream, a change in biological sex. Therefore, I urge you to support this legislation that clearly promotes the best interests of children. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll yield to you, Representative Decker, to recognize whomever you'd like next.
I think Dr. Ashburn, he may have.
Dr. Ashburn?
Yes, he may have had to go to another
Dr.
room.
William Thomas Ashburn, is he here physically?
He is here physically.
Okay, well, we'll see if he's here.
Is someone checking the auxiliary room?
Let's go ahead and call
Dr. Von,
who would be next. Dr. Van Mall.
yes.
Dr. Van Mall he's on Zoom, so Dr. Van Mall, if you'll unmute yourself, you have the floor.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Andre Van Mall. I am a board-certified family physician in California. I co-chair the Council on Adolescent Sexuality for the American College of Pediatricians, among other organizations that I help. I would have you know that transition-affirming medical interventions actually imperil at-risk gender dysphoric youth with experimental and unproven hormonal and surgical gender procedures, which medicalize prematurely and permanently. Transition-affirming medical interventions have not been proven effective. They have not been proven safe. They do not reduce suicides, and they're not actually the standard of care. Scientific and legal evidence is driving an international pushback against these kind of interventions in favor of intensive psychologic evaluation and support, and the lawsuits over the harms of transition have begun. I would have the committee know that the governments and medical and academic institutions in the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Finland, and to an increasing degree France, have rejected prioritizing gender-affirming transitions in favor of emphasizing extended mental health evaluation and support both for the child and the family. In fact, the UK closed the world's largest pediatric gender clinic, their NHS Tavistock Center, precisely because of the findings of comprehensive literature reviews. Desistance, as you've heard, is the norm for minors with trans identification, resolving on its own an average of 85% of the time by adulthood, unless it is affirmed. Why permanently medicalize a child for a condition that usually goes away? Gender-affirming medical interventions are actually not the standard of care. These pro-transition guidelines tend to derive from WPATH, which is neither a scientific nor a medical organization, and whose standards of care, as they call them, appear both internally inconsistent and to be window dressing that is ultimately not followed. And the recent SOC 8 removes all age restrictions for medical and surgical interventions. So just calling these standards of care does not make them so. In 2017, the Endocrine Society guidelines, the first by an actual medical organization, specified this disclaimer on page 3895 of the journal it appeared in. Quote, the guidelines cannot guarantee any specific outcome, nor do they establish a standard of care. So again, I would have you understand that transition is not the standard of care. Then there's the problem that minors cannot give truly informed consent. They have developing brains. Their minds change often, and they don't grasp long-term consequences. Again, that UK High Court in the Bell versus Tavistock decision of 2020 said this: there is no age-appropriate way to explain to many of these children what losing their fertility or full sexual function may mean to them in later years. In terms of risks, puberty blocking agents, or PBAs, chemically castrate at the level of the brain. PBAs risk infertility by blocking the maturing of sperm and eggs, and following them with cross-sex hormones guarantees sterility. PBAs compromise bone mineral density right when it should be achieving its period of peak increase. PBAs hinder brain development. They compromise sexual function. Self-harm does not improve on them, and they have not been proven to be fully reversible. Studies show long-term complications are known. As for cross-sex hormones, estrogen use in a biologic male strongly increases the risk of blood clots, heart attacks, strokes, breast cancer, insulin resistance, and more, and these increase with length of use. Testosterone use in a biologic female strongly increases the risks of heart attacks, strokes, breast and uterine cancer, hypertension, severe acne, and more. In fact, an international panel of endocrinology organizations was asked to look at the literature on testosterone use in females. They published in 2019, and I quote, "The only evidence-based indication for testosterone therapy for women is for the treatment of HSDD," by which they mean hypoactive sexual desire disorder. They found no exceptions and warned that the long-term safety of testosterone had not been established in women. Now, many regret their transitions. They tell us that their consent lacked information on the risks of the procedures as well as the available alternatives. But the problem with regret is what's gone is gone. Pro-gender transition studies commonly share the same fatal flaws that were aptly described by pediatric endocrinologist and academic Paul Hrues. He says these, quote, include a general lack of randomized prospective trial design, small sample size, recruitment bias, short study duration, very high subject dropout rates, and reliance on so-called expert opinion instead of expert evidence. The suicide reduction claim of transition is a myth, but it's commonly used as emotional blackmail against parents. We hear parents throughout the country telling us that they were told by therapists or doctors, do you want to have a live son or a dead daughter? Would you rather be planning a transition or a funeral? That's reckless and irresponsible. Researchers Bailey and Blanchard say there is no persuasive evidence that gender transition reduces gender dysphoric children's likelihood of killing themselves. A 2011 study out of Sweden that looked at all their sex reassignment patients over a 30-year span found if you follow them 10 years out, not 6 months, not a year, but 10 years out, they had 19 times the completed suicide rate of the general population and almost 3 times the rate of psychiatric hospitalization. A 2020 study by Brandstrom and Pachankis ultimately showed that neither gender-affirming hormone therapy nor gender-affirming surgery improved any of the mental health benchmarks they looked at. And the U.S. Center for Disease Control has been telling us for 30 years not to oversimplify reporting on suicide and not to attribute it to one thing, because there is no one thing that causes suicides. In conclusion, the chemical sterilization and surgical mutilation of otherwise healthy young bodies is not healthcare. Transition-affirming medical interventions are being rejected by the very nations that formerly led it. These interventions are not proven safe or effective. They're, in fact, unproven child experimentation masquerading as better. Minors should be protected from them, so I ask you to please support HB 470, and I thank you for your kind attention and allowing me to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Dr. Ashburn has joined us, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you may proceed with your testimony.
My name is Tom Ashburn. I'm a board-certified family medicine doctor who has practiced in Knox County, Kentucky for 35 years. I practiced full-spectrum family practice, including obstetrics. I delivered over 1,000 babies during my practice and have cared for thousands of children, their parents and grandparents, and I'm honored to be here this morning. The first issue in my mind in the discussion is that there's no debate that the brain development is not complete until approximately 25 years of age. There is some research that says the brain development may not even be completely formed until almost 30. So a child, youth, or teenager who are making decisions without fully functioning brains, and you also have they cannot make a fully informed medical decision because they don't have a full adult cognitive function. In other words, they're working with underdeveloped brains. I imagine that's why in Kentucky, if a doctor has a young lady who is the mother of several children or a young man who has several children in the state, the state will not pay for a sterilization procedure for them until they have reached 21 years of age. But yet, in some parts of our country, children are choosing to start using puberty blocking agents while still in the concrete stage of brain development, not even able to think abstractly. I'm sorry. I am not going to repeat any of the stuff that the previous doctor had said, so I wanted to conclude with a story of a patient from our office. This individual went to a clinic in Louisville on her own and was asked to receive hormone blockers and was placed on them with only screening questions asked. The individual was never offered or required to have a mental health evaluation. The person was placed on hormone blockers and hormones and never had any mental health treatment. The person was seen by a mid-level in my office who recommended that they see have a mental health evaluation by a
I'm
local
gonna stop you there.
psychiatrist.
You have 8 minutes remaining, and I don't know how you want to allocate that time, and I don't know how long his
Yeah.
remarks are going
And then
to go.
the patient went to Lexington to a surgeon and is now scheduled for gender transition surgery and has never had any mental health evaluation at all. I urge you to vote for House Bill 470. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. And your next witness, is that Luca Hine? Is that correct?
Yes.
If you would come into the committee room and introduce yourself, and you have about 7 minutes, so thank you.
Hello, my name is Luca Hine, and I was a trans kid. I'm here today as someone who not only went through the gender-affirming care system as a minor, but as someone who has been permanently harmed by these medical practices. I was just a young teenager with multiple mental health issues, including severe depression, anxiety, and ADHD. Along with that, I had been preyed upon, groomed, and sexually exploited online to the point of authorities getting involved. As a result of everything, I fell into a spiral of hatred towards myself and my body. The medical system did not seem concerned with the underlying issues causing the distress, the very distress that made me feel the need to escape my body at such a young age. Instead, I was affirmed down a path of medical intervention that I could not fully understand the long-term impacts and consequences of, nor fully consent to, due to both my age and my mental health conditions. At 16, the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy. And then a few months later, I was put on testosterone. My parents were baited and bullied with the threat of me committing suicide if they didn't go along with everything, despite the fact I have always maintained I was never suicidal. Told, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Those are not the words of a medical professional, but the words of an activist. A line from an activist that is not only unprofessional, but irresponsible and dangerous, as it goes against every way you should be talking about suicide. And it puts the idea in young people's heads that they only have two choices when there are always more than two options. As a result of this so-called gender-affirming care, if it could even be called care, at only 21, I feel as if my body is falling apart. I now deal with constant joint pain, rib and spine damage, heart issues, my vocal cords will ache. I watched as my muscle mass wasted away. I don't know if I will ever be able to carry a child, and my breasts are gone. I feel completely abandoned by the medical professionals that did this to me. I will have to live with this for possibly the rest of my life, and so will the many other people like me who are coming forward to talk about it. I was just a young teenager who needed actual help, not drugs and surgery. I needed that chance to grow up safe and whole. But that was taken away from me the minute I was affirmed down the pipeline that is the gender-affirming care industry. Minors cannot consent to being lifelong patients of an experimental medical industry. Puberty and growing up aren't diseases that needed to be cured. Children deserve to know that their body isn't something needing to be fixed. They deserve to get actual help that will get to the bottom of what is causing their distress. They deserve to grow up whole. Please, it is time for the adults in the room to stand up and follow the lead of the medical system and states that have taken the steps to protect these children. Please give these kids a chance to grow up whole. It's time to protect these kids because those who swore an oath to do no harm have failed. This isn't about hate. It's about doing no harm. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have an amendment to the committee sub. Yeah, it's not on.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm usually green, aren't I? There's a committee amendment.
Yes.
If you would discuss
Yes.
that, I think somebody was trying to make a motion before you could get started discussing it.
Thank
So
you.
I'll recognize the motion
There-
from
there-
Representative Petrie to adopt the amendment. Is
Second.
there a second? There's a second by Representative Nemus. Those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted, and you have about 4 minutes left of your time, so why don't you discuss
Thank you,
that in
Mr.
that
Chairman.
time?
This amendment, I believe the subject matter of it is covered in Section 1, subsection 6B3, but it was suggested to me that we could make that point even clearer, and so that is what this committee sub does. So in essence, this amendment adds to the definitions of the services, gender transition services, and specifically adds on page 2, line 19, after this act, says that gender transition services do not include services of a healthcare provider performed for the purpose of tapering and discontinuing the use of puberty-blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones prescribed to a person under the age of 18 years. And on page 30, it deletes the lines 10 through 13 in their entirety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to roll the committee amendment into the substitute? There's a motion by Representative Petrie. Is there a second? Second by Representative Nemus. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed, no, and that is adopted. So the time has expired, and now we will have our discussion in the committee. So those members who would like to be recognized, please raise your hand, and I'll recognize you accordingly. Is there any discussion about this bill? Representative Banta is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. And I want to thank Representative Decker. You did a really, really great job. This is a really hard situation, but I don't think that we should involve ourselves in parental decisions or family decisions. I think that we have some very, very smart people testifying today, but I don't feel that it's our position to interfere in the lives of families. And I'm hoping that by recognizing and listening today, that people go to the places with the best care and the best things that they can, the best services that they can get, which I know for a fact that a couple of our doctors that testified today offer that. So that's just kind of what I publicly want to say is find the very best care, don't wing it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Kulkarni, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to, I guess, reiterate to members the packet of information that we got, which was pretty compelling to me in terms of the businesses that were in opposition to this bill, and every major U.S. medical and mental health care organization. I wanted to ask the sponsor if you've spoken to members of the AMA, the KMA, the Pediatric Association, I mean, any of these organizations that oppose this bill?
I have read every word they've written on it, so I have fully understood their position. So I haven't talked with them, but I've read every written word they've uttered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Stevenson. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Hey, Representative Decker.
Microphone on. I have the same problem, so I understand.
I understand that you are an attorney, and our whole legal system is based on parents having control of their children. That under the age of 18, a student, a child has no agency. So why is the government trying to become the parent to hundreds of kids without, as far as I can read in this bill, without any efforts in the bill to show how you're going to do that? How are you going to parent kids when you take the parents out of the equation?
Thank you for that question, Representative Stevenson. I have great compassion for the children, parents, and their families who are in this situation. However, ultimately, it is our obligation to protect children from irreparable harm. The state has a compelling interest in that proposition. Representative Stevenson, we do not allow parents to give their children alcohol until the age of 18. We do not allow parents to give children cigarettes. We don't allow parents to turn over their car to children. The state has a compelling interest in protecting children from decisions that cause irreparable harm.
Very good. And
would you like a follow-up? You're
could I
ready.
please, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The other part of that, all that stuff happens in families. Cigarette smoking and drinking. Parents allow their children to do it in their home. Some even say, I'm going to do it so they won't do it in the streets. But we're not sending cops after those families. So my question is, the associations in this bill, we are telling associations that they have to decertify people. We're telling associations what the standards are. We're telling associations how to run their business. And we're legislators. I'm not a doctor. How is it that we get to substitute the government's political desires for professionals who do this lifelong? Yeah.
You have adopted the motivation that this is a political decision. The state must protect children from irreparable harm. That is the role of government.
Last thing, please, sir.
One more.
One more.
Absolutely. Thank you for
One more.
asking.
One more.
Thank you for asking. You're recognized.
And I just want to comment on the bill.
Please do.
Okay, thank you. You know, as a vet, I served 27 years in the United States Air Force for the freedom of all people, not just the ones you like. And also as a minister, an ordained minister, I believe that God made us perfectly. That's what we teach everybody. God is perfect and he makes no mistakes. And now we're saying God is messed up and he's made a lot of mistakes. So the legislators must step in and fix God's mistakes. It makes no sense. And then finally, as a mom, I have never, ever had anybody come into my house and tell me how to raise my kids. Why don't we give them help? Why don't we fulfill it by giving them mental health services, doing other things except taking away the parental rights and thinking that we're going to be there when they walk in the room and see their dead kid. We're going to be there when their kid is sad. Is the government going to be there when any of that happens? No. We're going to go back to our cushy places and think we've done a good job while families are suffering. This bill is a no because of all the wrong reasons. You can't make me do what you want me to do because you think it's good for me. Stop it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Stevenson. Representative Dietz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to all the testimony today. I've read all the emails that I've received. I've read most of the articles. And in the testimony that we heard today, I listened to Dr. Bowling, and he used the words safe, healthy, and happy. And I want to believe that everybody in this room wants the same things for their children: safe, happy, and healthy. And I don't believe that this bill accomplishes that. I'm a family law attorney, and I come to Frankfurt with a lot of different experiences and a lot of different stories. And I have cases where families are raising non-binary children and are dealing with these issues. And I don't believe that this legislation accomplishes this goal. It punishes physicians where they should be making the decisions on how to treat the family holistically, whether that's with therapy or with their recommendations. And I believe they've got licensure boards that can deal with anything that's unethical, but for us to predetermine what is unethical and not let that go before the licensure board, I have a problem with. So I'm going to be a no today.
And you can respond to that, Representative Decker, but obviously you don't have to, because it was a comment, I think, instead of a question. But that's perfectly fine.
Licensure is a matter of permission to do services in a state. It is the state's responsibility to ensure that licensures are not given for procedures that will damage children. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Representative Burke, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have, for the Representative Decker, 3 general legal questions about this bill. So the first relates to free speech rights, both of young people, their parents, and their doctors. Do you believe that this bill interferes with the free speech rights or is subject to challenge on the grounds of free speech for either children, parents, or their doctors?
No, I do not, especially even if there are things the doctors would like to say that are deemed unethical and harmful to children. The state has a compelling interest to abridge certain speech when it is harmful, and this is harmful speech.
Follow-up question about free speech.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. You are familiar with Tinker versus Des Moines, where it says students, in this case children, have the right to do performative speech. In that case, children were wearing black armbands in support of Vietnam veterans and withdrawing from the war in Vietnam. The court found that they had the right to do that. How can you distinguish a child's right to dress in a way that he or she feels comfortable and to use names and pronouns that make him or her feel comfortable from that same protected speech?
That what you just described is not covered by this bill. Where do you find it in the bill? It's not covered by the bill.
Well, I think you specifically say that they can't have a driver's license that reflects a different name.
That is a matter, again, of state compelling interest.
Okay. May I move on to a different question?
I think you said you had 3, so I'll let you do one more.
Okay. Then I'll hone in on Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. 1557 Affordable Care Act says that insurers cannot discriminate based on sex. The court, Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, found that applies to gender identity, sexual orientation. That was a strict reading. It was literal interpretation of the law when he found that insurers cannot discriminate based on sexual identity, orientation, gender identity. And now we are prescribing that they must do that. How is that constitutional?
Well, there is no person can have these services under the age of 18, regardless of their sex. It is not sex defined. Thank you.
Representative Herron, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Decker. Yesterday, when we left committee, you asked me what I thought about this bill and the committee sub, and at the time I had not seen it. And I think that this piece of legislation is shameful. I do not believe that legislation such as this belongs in this committee or any other committee. It's very interesting to sit here and listen to testimony, read the bill, that we want to insert ourselves in people's lives. We want to make decisions for people's health care. We've seen it in other pieces of legislation. And so I guess my question is, as far as the values that you have stood on prior to, is not wanting government in the lives of individuals. What makes this piece of legislation okay to be engaged in the lives of individuals?
The government should protect us from harm, not from ourselves, but from harm. This protects children from harm at the hands of others. Freedom is a matter that Luca will not be able to fully achieve because her body has been harmed by others. She has severe questions about her future. She's limited in her options. I've spoken with her outside of the committee when she tells me she wants to join a group that goes hiking, but she knows that she can't keep up anymore because of the harm done by hormones to her body. She needs protection. She needed protection by the state to keep her from being harmed, not to keep her from herself. She could not make that decision on her own as a child of 16. So it is not inconsistent. It is exactly what government should do, is protect us from harm at the hands of others. Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Moses.
Chairman.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes,
Okay,
I've got a follow-up.
Quickly, please.
And I want to thank Luca for your bravery. I don't know if you're still in the space. And I will never attempt to deny someone's experience. I also think that several things can be true at the same time. And being a masculine-centered individual who identifies as queer, I'm letting you know that this is a very dangerous and harmful piece of legislation. We will lose kids' lives. They will die. I had a friend text me last night and said to me, H, it's what they call me, H, you cannot let this piece of legislation pass. People are going to die. And I'm not finished. I've got one more comment. The other thing that I want to say to the members on this committee is one of the individuals who testified with you, Representative Decker, talked about the brain development of young people. And I'm glad that they brought that up because it's very true, that is scientifically true, that the brain of young people do not develop until 25. I want this body, as we're here in Judiciary, this is really a medical piece of legislation. But since we're here in Judiciary, I want this body to remember and understand, as we talk about our young people who are justice involved, let's also talk about their brains aren't developed until they're 25. When we talk about our young people and that they cannot give consent, let's also talk about that when they should not be interrogated with police officers without having a parent or a lawyer present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Herron and Representative Moser. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and then we're going to vote at 1:30.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry that I've been in and out. We had my Health Services Committee, which I had to chair. So I appreciate the changes in the committee sub. I still have pretty grave concerns about this piece of legislation. I'd like to just quickly read an email, and I know that we've heard from a lot of the healthcare community, but this is from a physician, and she says, As a physician and in upholding my Hippocratic oath, I cannot be halted in discussing important healthcare concerns with my patients. I am appalled at the suggestion that a legislative action would interfere with the mental health care of any individual. With the incidence of mental health issues skyrocketing in youth, I am flabbergasted that the legislature would consider a bill that would interfere with the health care of any individual. Transgender issues are not common, but when they are present, the incidence of severe depression and suicide are very real. How could the legislature possibly think that not allowing physicians and healthcare providers to talk about issues of gender identity or gender dysphoria would suddenly cause these issues to go away? These kids need help in understanding and guidance and support. And so I would agree that of all the important issues that we have to discuss here in Kentucky, that we're really, I think, addressing fear in this bill. We're imposing life-changing penalties on our healthcare workforce, and I think we need to be very cautious. We are forever changing who will come and work and live here. Nothing says we value healthcare workers like a 30-year statute of limitations. The message we are sending is atrocious to our healthcare workforce. We are stripping authority from the licensure boards who are obligated to report, investigate, and penalize any unethical breaches and malpractice. So instead, I think that we could strengthen our boards and instead of inserting more government, I think that there are ways to give our boards more authority if that's what we wish. I just am afraid that this proposal undermines everything that we've done to increase our healthcare workforce and address the shortfall. It undermines the work that we've done for the past 6 years to address mental health parity in our state. And we wonder why we have poor health metrics here in Kentucky. We are undermining physician training and discretion. We are limiting access to care. We are forgetting that we are concerned about social determinants of health. 80% of what family practitioners deal with in their office are often mental health issues. And so now we're legislating what physicians and apparently podiatrists, what they can say in the exam room. I mean, I understand the desire to keep our kids safe from predatory actions, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think this is unfortunately short-sighted and discriminatory. It sets Kentucky back decades. If we impose this law on our children, families, and healthcare workforce, we should start funding things like the mental health first aid law that we passed a few years ago. And we just passed a law, a bill in my committee, in the Health Services Committee, that implements Safe KY to deal with kids in crisis. So
Thank you
what are we doing?
for your comments,
May I
Representative
respond?
Moser. We've gone over our 2
Mr.
minutes.
Chairman, may I respond?
I'll give you 30 seconds.
I believe, Representative Moser, that you're talking about a bill that is not before you. There is no podiatrist in the committee sub, nor is there any mental health counseling. So I think you're addressing a bill that's not before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion on House Bill 470 as amended by the committee substitute and the committee amendment thereto? Motion by Representative Petrie. Is there a second? Second by Representative Nemus. Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Banta,
No.
Representative Lanton,
Aye.
Representative Bratcher,
Yes.
Representative Bray, Representative Burke,
Unequivocally, no.
Representative Decker,
Yes.
Representative Dietz,
No.
Representative Doan,
Yes.
Representative Flannery,
Yes.
Representative Herron,
No.
Representative Kulkarni,
Briefly explain my vote,
No,
Mr. Chairman.
we're not
No?
recognizing
Okay, I'm a no today.
explanation of vote, but I
No today,
I
thank
appreciate your effort.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Maddox, Representative Mosier,
No.
Representative Nemus, Representative Petrie,
Yes.
Representative Rawlings,
Yes.
Representative Sharp,
Aye.
Representative Stevenson,
No.
Representative Wilson, Chairman Elliott.
Aye. Is there a member wishing to record a vote? Did she? Okay, great. She did. Did you? Were you recorded? Great. That's okay. Do you have that? With 14 yes votes, 7 no votes, and 0 pass votes, House Bill 470, as amended by the committee substitute with the committee amendment thereto, is passed. Murderer! And will be reported with favorable expression that the same should pass. This committee is adjourned.